a canyon swept by a wind that sounds like a mourning cry, as if the land itself is grieving. This atmosphere mirrors the desperate state of the 7 Apache girls who have been left hanging, barely alive. Their wrists are tied above them, bodies strained, breaths thin and weak. The scene is not only physically brutal but emotionally haunting, portraying the cruelty they have endured and the hopelessness that now surrounds them. The men who did this believed they had hidden their crime where no one would see it. The canyon is remote, harsh, and avoided by most settlers and travelers. To them, the girls were meant to be forgotten, swallowed by the wilderness. This detail reveals the ruthlessness of the attackers and the vulnerability of native people during times of conflict and prejudice. It also heightens the tension. These girls were not meant to survive, and no help was expected to come. But far away on a ridge, a lone rider moves across the land. This is Elias Crow, a quiet rancher known for his reclusive nature but also for small, unnoticed acts of kindness. The story emphasizes that he is not a hero by reputation. He is a man who simply listens to his conscience. Earlier that day, Elias saw smoke rising in the distance. Something about it felt wrong, different from the usual campfires and ranch smoke he was used to. That suspicion led him to follow the trail, without knowing he was riding toward a moment that would test both his courage and his humanity. As Elias approaches the canyon, he hears something faint, something that stops him cold. A small sob, weak and nearly lost to the wind. It is this fragile sound that changes everything. The author uses this moment to show Elias's sensitivity and instinct to protect life. He doesn't hesitate out of fear or doubt. His heart responds before his mind catches up. The discovery of the girls becomes a turning point, both for him and for the story, marking the beginning of a rescue driven, not by heroism, but by compassion and moral duty, where Elias, the rancher, is forced to choose between his own safety and the lives of the 7 Apache girls. As he steps into the clearing and finally understands the horror of what he's witnessing, the narrative shifts from observation to action. Elias dismounts his horse so quickly that he barely feels the ground beneath his boots. His entire body reacts before his mind can process the danger. The shock is immediate. The girls are still alive, but just barely. Their heads hang forward, breaths shallow, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, injuries, and exposure. At this moment, Elias faces a very real fear. He knows the political tension in the region. Settlers and Apache groups were in constant conflict, with mistrust running deep. Anyone caught helping native people, especially those labeled as rebels or raiders, could face accusations, retaliation, or even violence from his own community. The men who left the girls to die might still be nearby, watching from the shadows. This is not a simple good deed, it is a dangerous act of defiance. Yet the story emphasizes that morality for Elias isn't something he debates. It lives inside him quietly, shaped by a childhood where his mother taught him compassion above pride and humanity above prejudice. The turning point comes when he locks eyes with the youngest girl. Her eyes are swollen from crying, her lips cracked, but she still manages a whispered plea. Please. That single word shatters any hesitation Elias might have had. It is the purest form of human need, a child begging for life. Without wasting another second, Elias draws his knife. His hands move with purpose even though his heart pounds. As he cuts the ropes, each strand falling away feels like a small rebellion against the cruelty inflicted upon them. The girls collapse as they're freed, their legs too weak to hold them. Elias catches them, lowering them gently to the ground. He works methodically, moving from one girl to the next, his breath unsteady but his resolve firm. Focuses on the fragile battle between life and death as Elias works desperately to revive the 7 Apache girls. After cutting them down, he is confronted with the terrifying possibility that his help may be too late. Their bodies are cold to the touch, their breaths faint and uneven, and their eyes barely open. This moment is heavy with emotional tension. Elias is not a trained medic, yet he refuses to surrender them to despair. His heart guides his hands. The narrative emphasizes Elias's upbringing, revealing that his mother taught him practical skills rooted in compassion. She believed that a person should always know how to preserve life, whether human or animal. Those teachings now become his tools. Elias quickly gathers dry brush and builds a fire, shielding it with his body so the flames catch despite the harsh canyon wind. The fire is more than warmth. It symbolizes hope, a flicker of life in a place where cruelty nearly extinguished it. He removes his own coat, a thick, worn rancher's coat, and, drapes it over the girls, rotating it among them to share what little heat he has. He warms stones in the fire, wrapping them in cloth to avoid burning their skin, and presses them gently against their hands and feet to restore circulation. Every action is slow, deliberate, and filled with urgency. The story reinforces that Elias knows their survival depends not just on physical heat but on reassurance. He speaks softly to them, offering words of comfort even if they cannot respond. Hours pass, marked by the crackling of the fire and the shallow breaths of the girls. Elias refuses to rest. He gives them sips of water, holding their heads carefully so they don't choke. When the eldest girl, Nala, finally stirs, it is a moment of triumph. Her voice is weak, barely a whisper, but the question she asks carries profound emotional weight. Why would you help us? This question reveals the fear and mistrust rooted in generations of conflict. To Nala, kindness from a settler man is not expected, it is almost unimaginable. Elias's response, simple and sincere, "No one deserves to die afraid," captures the essence of his character. He is not motivated by heroism, glory, or obligation. He is driven by empathy, deepens the emotional weight of the story by revealing the brutal truth behind what happened to the 7 Apache girls. After they regain a little strength, the girls begin opening up to Elias, not because they fully trust him yet, but because they finally feel safe enough to speak. Their voices are trembling, uneven, and shadowed by trauma. Each detail they share paints a clearer picture of the cruelty they endured and the danger that still surrounds them. The narrative explains that the girls were traveling with their families when they were ambushed by a group of raiders. These raiders were not a single unified group but a mix: bitter settlers, outlaws, and men driven by hatred and greed. They wanted to send a message, one steeped in intimidation and violence. The attack left several of the girls' relatives dead or scattered, and the girls themselves were taken captive. The raiders' intention was never mercy. It was domination, fear, and punishment. The girls resisted, showing courage beyond their years, and that defiance made the raiders even more vicious. Instead of killing them quickly, the raiders chose a slow and torturous method, hanging them just high enough to leave them struggling, suffering, and terrified. The wooden beam they were tied to was built not as a structure of execution but as a spectacle of cruelty, left in a hidden canyon, so their deaths would be unnoticed, unchallenged, and unpunished. As Elias listens, he feels anger rising inside him, not a reckless anger that pushes him toward violence, but a deep, quiet fury at the injustice done to innocent children. He sees the bruises, the rope burns, the haunted looks in their eyes. For a man who had spent most of his life avoiding conflict, this moment forces him to confront a truth he cannot escape: evil thrives when good men do nothing. The story highlights the internal battle Elias faces. He is not a warrior, nor is he a man used to taking sides in conflicts. But now, after hearing their story, he realizes he cannot simply walk away. The girls need protection, guidance, and someone willing to stand between them and the men who may come hunting for them again. Their suffering calls him to act, not out of heroism, but out of shared humanity. Marks the moment when Elias transitions from a rescuer to a guardian, fully accepting the danger and responsibility that now rests on his shoulders. After hearing the heartbreaking account of what the girls endured, his decision becomes clear: he cannot leave them here, and he cannot return to his ranch, pretending nothing happened. The world they had known hours earlier has been shattered, and their only hope lies in reaching their people again. But doing so will require courage far beyond anything Elias has faced before. The narrative shows the weight of his decision. Elias understands the harsh reality: guiding 7 traumatized, injured girls across hostile land is not just risky, it is nearly impossible. Raiders could still be nearby, and the territory between the canyon and the Apache settlement is watched by both enemies and strangers who would gladly blame him for helping them. Yet none of this stops him. Where another man might hesitate, Elias feels something firm settle inside him, a quiet promise forming before he even speaks the words aloud. He kneels beside the girls, making sure he meets the eyes of each one. They sit close together around the fire. Wrapped in blankets, he pieced together from his saddle gear. Fear still grips them, but there is something new forming too, a flicker of belief that maybe they are not doomed after all. When Elias tells them, "If you trust me, I will see you home," the girls exchange uncertain looks. Trust, for them, has been broken again and again. The world has shown them cruelty more often than kindness. Nala, the eldest, carries the responsibility of answering. Her heart is torn. She wants to believe him, but she also knows danger waits in every direction. The younger girls lean into her, seeking guidance. In this moment, the story emphasizes the girls' inner strength. Though victims, they are not fragile. They have endured horror and are still fighting to survive. Nala finally nods. Her voice is soft but steady when she says, "We trust you, rancher." Elias doesn't take their trust lightly. The promise becomes a bond stronger than fear, stronger than uncertainty. This decision also reshapes him. Until now, he has lived a quiet life, avoiding conflict, but saving these girls forces him to step into a role he never imagined: protector, guide, and the only shield they have in a world intent on hurting them. Where the story shifts into a tense, survival-driven journey. After Elias makes his promise to guide the 7 Apache girls home, the reality of that promise begins to unfold. The land between the canyon and the Apache settlement is vast, rugged, and filled with danger, not only from the raiders, but from the natural world itself. The chapter highlights the vulnerability of the girls and the immense responsibility now resting on Elias' shoulders. They travel mostly at night, using the stars as their guide. The darkness is a double-edged sword. It hides them from enemies, but it also hides threats on even ground, predators, and the unpredictable terrain of the frontier. Elias insists on walking beside the horse instead of riding it so the girls can share the space in the saddle and conserve their strength. Every step leaves a trail, and he constantly brushes out their footprints with a branch to avoid detection. The girls are exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Some struggle to walk for long, and others tremble each time they hear a distant sound. Their fear is not imaginary. More than once, Elias hears shouts echoing across the night. The threat feels close, breathing down their necks. But each time danger approaches, Elias positions himself instinctively between the girls and the sound, becoming their silent shield. His actions speak louder than words. One of the youngest girls, Suni, often walks near Elias. She watches him with wide, uncertain eyes, trying to understand why a man who owes them nothing would risk everything. At one point, her small hand tugs at his sleeve, and she whispers a question filled with innocence and fear. "You're not afraid?" Elias answers with honesty rather than bravado. "Of course I'm afraid, but fear ain't bigger than doing right." This moment deepens their bond and shows the girls that courage is not born of strength, it is born of choice. The journey is slow, grueling, and shadowed by the constant threat of being found. Yet, through it all, Elias' presence gives the girls something they haven't felt since the attack: a sense of safety. Every mile they cross brings them closer to home and further from the cruelty left behind. Part 6 captures the heart of the story. Kindness, when tested by fear and danger, becomes the purest form of courage. The emotional climax of the story, the moment when fear gives way to relief, when suffering finally meets safety. After days of traveling through darkness, hiding from raiders, and pushing their exhausted bodies across unforgiving land, Elias and the 7 Apache girls finally reach the outskirts of their homeland. The shift in atmosphere is immediate. The girls, who have been silently carrying trauma and fear, suddenly sense something familiar in the air: the smell of smoke from cooking fires, the soft murmur of voices, the patterns of the land they know by heart. It awakens hope in them like a long-lost heartbeat. As they reach the valley, the Apache settlement comes into view. At first, no one notices them. Then, a young boy sees the group approaching and shouts, drawing the attention of the entire camp. What follows is an eruption of emotion. Families rush toward the girls' mothers, crying out their daughters' names. Fathers collapsing in disbelief. Siblings running to embrace them. The reunion is not gentle. It is overwhelming, filled with sobs, trembling hands, and the raw relief of people who believed their children were dead. Elias steps back, allowing the family space. He does not want to intrude on a moment that belongs to them. Yet even as he retreats, some of the Apache people look at him with surprise, confusion, and deep gratitude. Word begins to spread quickly. A rancher brought the girls home, alive. The tribal chief approaches Elias with dignity and solemnity. Though his face shows the sternness of a leader, his eyes reflect gratitude and respect. For a moment, they simply stand before each other, two men from different worlds, both burdened by loss and responsibility. The chief finally speaks, acknowledging the risk Elias took and the life he restored to 7 families. Elias, humble as always, tries to downplay his actions, saying, "I just did what any man ought to do." But the chief knows better. Very few would have done what he did. The girls, exhausted but safe, gather once more around Ilyas. Nala steps forward and gives him a beaded korda, handmade token of honor, family, and eternal gratitude. She tells him, "You gave us back our lives." This gesture anchors the emotional weight of the chapter. Kindness can cross borders, heal wounds, and reshape destinies. Brings the story to a gentle, emotional conclusion, one filled with gratitude, healing, and the quiet power of kindness. After returning the 7 Apache girls safely to their families, Ilya stands on the edge of the settlement, ready to leave without ceremony. He never acted for praise. In his mind, he simply did what his conscience demanded. But the story makes it clear that his actions ripple far beyond what he realizes. Before he departs, the girls gather around him, still weak but standing together, a symbol of survival and unity. Nahala steps forward, representing all her sisters. In her hands, she carries a handmade beaded cord, crafted with care by the Apache women in the camp as an expression of honor. When she places it in Ilyas's palm, the moment is rich with cultural meaning. It is not merely a gift, but an adoption of sorts, a way of telling him he will forever be remembered as a friend, a brother, and a protector of their people. Nala's words carry the emotional weight of the entire story. "You gave us back our lives. We will remember you in every sunrise." To the Apache, sunrise represents renewal, survival, and the continuation of life after darkness. Through her words, the girls promise that what Ilyas did will not fade into the dust of the desert. It will live in their hearts and in the stories they pass down to future generations. It is the ultimate acknowledgement of the difference a single act of compassion can make. Ilyas rides away quietly, carrying the beaded cord, like a symbol of the journey he never expected to take. As he returns to his ranch, he reflects not on the danger he faced, but on the humanity he witnessed, the courage of the girls, the strength of their families, the gratitude in their eyes. For a man who lived a solitary life, the experience opened something inside him he didn't realize had closed. A sense of purpose, of being part of something greater. The story ends not with grand celebration but with the quiet truth that kindness often goes unseen by the world, yet it leaves its mark on the hearts it touches. Ilyas never tells anyone what he did, but the Apache people remember. The 7 girls remember, and somewhere deep inside, Ilyas carries the knowledge that, in a world filled with cruelty, he chose compassion and changed 7 lives forever.